Good morning from the beautiful USVI down in St. Croix. Um, I'm still down here for a few days, and just decided to talk a little bit more extemporaneously. The other day I was talking to someone about wargaming, and he asked me, "You mean games like Risk?" And I'm in a bad focus there, but that's my own game. Got a bad setup, man. Got a bad setup down here. That's my own game, Unconventional Hero, available on Amazon. Um, but he said, "You mean like Risk?" And I thought, a knee-jerk reaction is to say, no, nothing like Risk. We don't do Risk, right? Um, and I said, well, not exactly like Risk, but yeah, somewhat like Risk. And it got me to thinking, well, what is a war game? What do we consider war games? I mean, the war game community, hobby. I'd rather use that word hobby. A community, I always think, is something that you can put a fence up and keep people out of. A hobby is something you just do. So that's what wargaming is. It's a hobby. For me, in my line of thinking, I want as many people as that want to play war games, right? But people will say something like, we talk about war games, and all of us have a definition, right? But what is your definition? What's the easiest definition of what a war game actually is? Is it a game about war? That's always been my go-to definition. It's a game about war. Okay, so that would make Risk a war game. That makes Battleship a war game. Is that true? Is Battleship a war game? Well, if a gun to my head, I would say, yeah, it's a war game. It's not a very strategic war game in the least, but it is a war game. It's double blind. You do so. Excuse me. So, but I know some people that will take a hard line and say this isn't a war. They'll go so far and say something like Axis and Allies. That ain't a war game. It's not a war game. It's never been a war game. And while there is problems with Axis and Allies, I'm not saying there isn't. I think it's obviously a war game. Again, and if it's obviously a war game, I think Risk is an obvious war game. Again, you may find about the validity of those games, and you may talk about the ahistoricalness of those games, but yet, is a war game just a simulation? Are sci-fi games war games? Of course they can be. But I know some people that say, no, it has to be a simulation about a war that has happened. Historical war. And I love historical war gaming, don't get me wrong. But what's that mean? What's a simulation? What if you make ahistorical troop movements? Does that suddenly make that not a war game, or make you not a war gamer? Because I like to try different things. I like to try the ahistorical things. Of course, I want to do the ahistorical things. Just to see what would happen. But I've heard people say that, well, you're playing ahistorically. Of course. I'm not playing the same way that it played out. I don't really want to, or we're all going to go back to playing, one of the old Avalon Hill games and make the same moves the same times and know the optimal routes and know the optimal. Yeah, that's not what I want to do. But yeah, it just got me thinking, hey, we all have our own definitions of war game. Is there one definition that we all can agree upon? Probably not, by the way. Probably not, because just how we are in the hobby. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. Being combative and argumentative about this kind of stuff is, in some ways, good. But I just was thinking about it, Take this. Take one of my games, by the way. I mean to push the idea of what a war game is. I like looking at things that aren't traditionally tied into war. Like right here in Unconventional Hero, you're playing a company clerk in Vietnam, right? You're basically playing Radar O'Reilly from MASH, although that was Korea, I know. No need to tell me. But yeah, you have a chance to die in combat or by in war, in a conventional war way, right? You do have a chance. You have even a chance to engage in combat, But those chances are slimmer, much slimmer than they would if you were to be, an infantryman, right? It's and that's just what I wanted to look at. And right now, I'm doing a game on you're going to play a cook during. I don't know when it is going to be set, but I've been working on it and finding out a lot about cooks, believe it or not. But in war, and I haven't even figured out if it's going to be an Army or Navy cook yet. It'll even have less combat, right? I will have a combat mechanic in there, but it won't be traditional combat. And so, does it have to have combat, for example, to be a war game? Of course, I would say combat is the biggest indicator of a war game, right? I think you need some kind of combat, yes. But, the old adage, nobody wants to play the quartermaster, right? I mean, sure, but some of that, you look at some of that is instrumental in war. That's the whole reason of the cook thing. The army marches on its belly, right? So, but yeah, that's just my thoughts and my thinking. They have to have hexes. Some people tell you if it doesn't have hex encounters, then it's not a war game. I even had someone, even though it wasn't hexed, I even had someone say the original Axis and Allies with the paper map and the chits, the counters, it was a war game, but as soon as they went to minis, it was. I had somebody tell me that one time. As soon as they went to minis, well, why? Why is that? So, yeah, that's it. That's all I'm thinking about today. Another day in the USVI down here in St. Croix. Very interesting island. It's only 28 miles long by 7 miles wide, yet you have high desert and rainforest on the same island. Blows my mind. Blows my mind. But it is a diving and snorkeling paradise out here. So, anybody got a chance, you should, and you're interested in doing anything around the ocean, you should definitely come down. All right, that's it. Talk to you soon. Y'all be, excuse me. Y'all be good. Y'all be careful. I'll talk at you as soon as I can. Bye-bye.